asking for the breakdown. They used to produce reports to show the number of people coming in with these white sheets and whatnot. I'm still waiting on that data because I'm sort of come to the same conclusion, is that the majority of the beach users are picture pass holders, but we also have, I'm looking to find out if we have over the years a significant increase in the number of picture pass holders. So for me, I'm looking for data to try to figure out how, if there's an issue, how do you resolve it without doing harm to the residents? Yeah, I spend a lot of time, I walk past the beaches all the time, and I ask people how, are they local, do they get in? And there are a number of people of, no, I have a friend who lives here and I got a pass. To me that seems like, those types of situations we should probably put a stop to, but we have to understand what number of people that is compared to the local residents who are using their picture pass cards. So I look forward to getting the data, looking at the data, working with the community to try to formulate ideas and suggestions of how to improve the situation. Thank you.
So Indra does a great job of presenting that data to the board every year. That presentation is available in our board packets.
It's not.
And I think Misty and Indra are going to kill me if I don't actually mention this. For those of you guys that are interested in learning more about the beaches, we are having a Beaches 101 presentation on Wednesday night at the Chateau at 6 p.m. So come join us then.
Any further comments about this? No, okay, very good. Next question. Many folks believe that the board, many folks believe that I should use this microphone. Okay. Many folks believe that the board permits the general manager to expend $50,000 for each individual matter without board approval. This includes legal actions. How do you see this issue? And should the initiation of any legal action be subject to prior board approval?
I'll jump in on that one, Andy. Tim Callaway, for those in the back. NRS statutes dictate that any legal action taken by a public body in the state of Nevada, whether it's a GID, a county, or another faction, any legal action must first be agendized. It has to be discussed at the board level, a vote has to be taken, and there has to be a financial number stuck to that, whether it's a penny, $100,000, a not to exceed, whatever. And if this is in reference to the litigation against flash vote or governmental services, and I'm one of two on the board, I believe that that was not the right direction for the board to take. It should have been agendized, discussed in open and meeting, and then gone forward. That didn't take place. That being said, all litigation has to be begun at the board level. That's in Nevada Revised Statute 318. Some in the district, including our attorney, will argue that, but the law is the law, and I'm all about obeying what the law states and the intent of the law, and as well as the board policies and procedures, which will, I'm sure, come up down the road. But as far as the legal, it has to be before a board in a publicly agendized meeting. Thank you.
I went to the meeting when the board, again, passed a policy that they would require such a movement to come before the board and get board approval before they move forward with anything legal like that in the future. Again, they've raised the limit for the general manager's expenditures to $50,000. When I was on the board, we had a list of things that we would okay at every meeting, and it was anything over, I think, $5,000 or $10,000 to alleviate the necessary time that it took to go over these items and the amount of time that it delayed getting things done. The board started to raise that level of approval needed for the general manager. We can revisit that collaboratively. I mean, it's worth a discussion. If it's become ineffective at this level, obviously we can change the board policy. Again, due diligence when things come up and are being spent. I think that the trustees need to be engaging the general manager and people making these decisions so that they understand what the expenditures are and if they're needed or not, and why the certain amount is what it is. Thank you.
Yeah, it was about 4 years ago when that change was made, because I think you were rolling off the board, and it was one of the first things that I actually voted on. The threshold was raised from $25,000 to $50,000. And when we voted on this, there was a analysis of the number of items that were between the thresholds of $25,000 and $50,000. And quite frankly, it was less than 10 items per year. And so the board voted to increase the signing authority to the general manager to $50,000, with the stipulation that anything that he authorized between $25,000 and $50,000, he sends a note to the board in writing, usually via email, to let us know what it's about. And the main driver behind this was, if something happens in an emergency situation, the general manager then has a $50,000 signing authority to be able to authorize emergency repairs. And if it's above that level, then we have to essentially call an emergency board meeting of all the board members. And so that was the main driver behind the decision, was to allow the district to keep moving forward if there ever was an emergency where he needed that signature authority.
This is Sarah Schmitz. I understand that the general manager needs to do his job and needs to have the authority to do his job. I reviewed the policies, and in the conduct of meetings at Board of Trustees, Policy 3.1, it does indicate, once again, in 2 places that he has the authority up to $50,000. My revision that I would like to see made to that is a stipulation that says, if it's budgeted. If it's budgeted, then go ahead. But if it's not budgeted and it's additional spending, then I had made a recommendation to the Board of Trustees a couple of months ago that if Mr. Pinkerton could just provide a report to the board and the public about what decisions are being made on discretionary spending, it would avoid surprises and avoid issues. So I completely understand that, you know, he needs to be able to carry out his job and do his tasks, but I think that the board policy should be changed with the stipulation to say that if it's budgeted, if it's within the budget. Thank you.
That would defeat the purpose of needing emergency funding.
So, just, can I understand, that maybe everyone else out there does get, the general manager can expend $50,000 without board approval, except having to do with a legal action. Any legal action must have board approval.
Only in initiating a lawsuit, that's what the language in the board policy says. He cannot initiate a lawsuit.
Once it's been initiated, then he has the flexibility, but it has to be initiated at the board level by the board proper.
Yes.
It's a Supreme Court decision. It's a Supreme Court decision.
So we all understand that? Great, good. Let's see.
State that understanding so that you can all.
The general manager has signing authority up to $50,000. If we need to initiate a legal action, then the board has to approve that.
Mr. Facilitator, could you ask the 2 candidates on the left to practice some consideration and announce their names, please?
Names. My fault. Mention your name again. How to go. Let's see.
Angie,
Yes.
when are we going to start fielding questions from the audience here?
We're going to get there in about 20 minutes.
Okay.
Yes. They're very anxious. Do they look anxious to you?
Very much so, and I just, out of respect for the folks who come here tonight, I'd like to hear some questions from the audience here, and it's nice, stiflingly hot, and thank you whoever brought the water up to us. It was a real
Thank
godsend.
you. Thank you.
Andrew, do you want some too? My hands weren't big enough.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, so what Let us move on now to direct questions to individual board members. So I'm gonna ask a question.
Candidates, not board members.
Not yet, no. The questions for individual board members, candidates for board members, thank you very much. Ms. Wong, since you made that correction, Ms. Wong, you are the current board chair. What are your greatest accomplishments and your most regrettable failures? What would you do differently if re-elected to the board?
Ooh. I'll start with the failures. I think one of my greatest failures, and if Phil is in the room, I have to apologize, was not making the motion to nominate him to our board the first time around. I think that is probably my greatest mistake. I was fortunate enough, or unfortunate enough, that when Bill Devine had to resign because he moved off the Hill, that I had an opportunity to rectify that on board. Phil has been an absolute pleasure to work with. I appreciate his logic in decision making, and I absolutely respect all the decisions that he makes, whether we end up on the same side of an issue or not. In terms of greatest accomplishments, you know, I think one of the things that I actually think is an accomplishment has been streamlining our board meetings. Our board meetings used to go until 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning. We used to actually take bets on how long we would actually be there. We are now consistently ending between 9 and 9:30, and I think we've had a good opportunity to have some great discussions at the board level, whether we agree or disagree.
Any comments about that particular? Okay. Mr. Simonian, you argue that you're running for the board because...
Andy, microphone.
Don't put it down.
Mr. Simonian, you argue that you are running for the board because it is, quote, polarized and dysfunctional, unquote, because a, quote, vocal minority is controlling the village, unquote, and because, quote, allegations of impropriety, misuse of funds, cooking the books, lack of transparency, lying and stealing have got to stop, unquote. Yet, similar though perhaps less obviously divisive and accusatory issues arose when you were last on the board. What specific actions would you undertake to change the parameters you described?
Bruce Simonian. There's my name. I've worked with men recently in the Mankind Project. What I would bring to the board is listening. I encourage people to come to the board and share their thoughts. Working on the Diamond Peak Steering Committee, we had total opponents moving into that committee, and we were able to get things accomplished by listening, validating concerns and passion. I'm going to do that on the board. I understand that we have divided thoughts, we don't have common philosophies, but we don't accomplish anything if we don't sit down and talk together. I encourage people to bring their thoughts, their ideas to the board level, to the staff, give them the respect that they deserve, rather than undermine them out in the public, somewhere in the newspaper, etc. It doesn't serve anybody. I considered a few things before I ran. The IVGID meetings have become a black hole where joy and morale come to die. You know, I want to change that. There's no reason to have that sort of discourse. Nothing's been accomplished. There's been people here, I call it the relentless pursuit of impropriety, and it's been dismissed. You know, the fact that there's been a ton of open meeting law violations submitted, and ethics complaints. Most of those have been dismissed. Thank you.
It's not true.
Mr. Calgrave,
Yes.
you have consistently been in the minority on this board. How do you account for that? Assuming there's no change in board membership after this election, what, if anything, would you do differently? And if the board composition changes and you are in the majority, what would you then do?
Tim Gallagher. I have been in a minority on issues dealing with our financials, primarily, what I campaigned on versus what I've been able to accomplish. And it's been very frustrating and very difficult, I'm first to admit that. And just for the record, I believe that we've had actually 6 boards that Kendra and I have served on, from when we were first elected to Jim Smith resigning to it being a 4-person board, on and on and on. So the transition's been very tough. I'm going to stick to my guns regarding how I feel about the finances and about zero-based budgeting and things of that nature. I have reached out to my colleagues. I don't think that you guys were here. I think that you were over in Maui, but perhaps you heard about it. But I have reached out to Kendra and Phil and Peter, trying to find commonalities. And if you look at the votes, actually there have been a number of 5-0 votes where we've all agreed to move forward. In the budgeting process, it's been difficult. And I understand how that works, but when the board has made its decision, that's what I have to abide by. Should I find myself in a majority, I'll deal with it at that point. I'm not going to project that far ahead because we're so far out from the general election in November. I hope I have that opportunity, but I think it would be ill-advised of me trying to say what I would do because I don't think that serves anyone any purpose. Let's wait until it actually happens. Thank you.
Okay, one last question, and then I know you're all waiting to ask your questions. Ms. Schmitz, in the Friday, June 29th, 2018 opinion section of the Tahoe Daily Tribune, you wrote, "The Incline Village Improvement District Board of Trustees has been cited 15 times by the Office of the Attorney General for open meeting law violations in 2017. The district was also admonished for violating the spirit and intent of this law." And the question becomes, the implication of your statement that trustees were cited 15 times is that IVGID did something grievously wrong on multiple occasions. Please explain what these 15 cites were about, how many were filed, by whom, their relevance, and how you would change things.
Great question. The 15 violations were open meeting violations for not submitting, not distributing, finalizing meeting minutes. It's an open meeting law that meeting minutes are to be made available to the public 30 days after the meeting. Some of these were, 90 days, what have you. So they were not, they were violations of open meeting laws. I don't know why this has been happening with the board. I don't understand, whether it's an issue with communication, but in any event, as a district, we need to abide by the laws that govern us. And abiding by open meeting laws and abiding by laws in NRS 318, that's the law that we operate under. So those statements were not, inflammatory. They were actually factual information about cases. I think what I would do differently is get to the root cause of the problem. Is the problem the issue with the attorney? Is the problem, what is the problem? Why can't we produce minutes within 30 days? That seems like a pretty simple task. So I would definitely fix it.
Thank you.
Andy, can I rebut?
Sure.
So first of all, let's start with, anybody can file an open meeting law. This is kind of wrong. Anybody can file an open meeting law complaint. That doesn't mean it's a violation. In fact, I have the list of all the open meeting complaints going back to 2013. They were filed by Frank Wright, Aaron Katz, Frank Wright, Judith Miller, Frank Wright, Aaron Katz, Linda Newman, Aaron Katz, Frank Wright, Paul Olson, Aaron Katz, Frank Wright, Judith Miller, Aaron Katz, Frank Wright, Aaron Katz. Now, I should tell you, through the last day that I now analyzed this in detail, All of these were found as being closed with no finding of a violation except for 2. We had to take corrective action on 2 items, which the board did, and we moved on. If anybody wants to see this document, it is a public document. You can request it from Susan Herron, or I can give you a copy tonight.
Andy, just as a correction, all 15 of those open meeting law violations were found in violation. They were then corrected by the board. So to say that they were dismissed is a bit askew of what actually took place. Let's go back to the first year we were on the board in 2015. There were 2 open meeting law violations that were found against the board. They were eventually rectified. So to say because of the names attached to this, you know, and yes, I chuckle too. I've had run-ins with Frank from the first time I was on the board 18 years ago. We also had Dick Mudgett and David Strong and a whole other cast of people. So the names change, the activities continue. But we have been cited by the Attorney General and admonished as a board, and to say that these are all just dismissed, that's not being as upfront as we need to be. That being said, they've all been corrected. That's the best part. So now we move forward and we don't make the same mistakes again, hopefully. Thank you.
So at this point, we're going to move into the round of questioning from the audience, and let me reiterate what I promised on my candidates up here. A well-mannered round of questions from the audience will commence. So who has a question? Right up here.
How long is the response, Andy? How long do you want the response?
We're at 90 seconds.
Okay.
60. Yep. Yes.
Thank you, Gail Crowley. So it's not a question, Annie, it's just an observation. I see the division already. I see Ms. Wong and Bruce, one end of the table. I see Tim and Ms. Schmitz on this end of the table.
You gotta make it.
Okay, here's my question. Here's my question. Andy, here's my question. Why do these 2 candidates have this wonderful form with all the names, but these 2 candidates don't have this information? Really simple. And would you guys mind just switching up so we don't see the division before the election? Like seriously, Tim, please get up and just switch with Kendra. I just want to see some difference. This is ridiculous.
Next time.
It's ridiculous.
Well, the reason why I have this is because I requested it from our legal counsel.
So why don't the other members have it?
Excuse me.
Sure.
Why?
Someone get advanced
Andy, no one answered my question though. If it was requested, why don't all the candidates have the same information that Ms. Wong requested? That's only being fair, Andy. I'd like to know why the other 2 candidates don't have information.
Because she knew what the question was and we didn't.
Let them make the candidates.
Please.
Let me reply to that real quickly. Allegations were made, and we went ahead and picked up the information so that we would have an accurate response. My assumption is they would have the same information, making the same allegation on this.
And it isn't an allegation, it's reporting the Attorney General's findings. It's not an allegation, it's just, if you look, I believe in the newspaper article, I even included what the case number was so that the public and the newspaper made me verify my facts. So they did all of the fact checking of everything that I had written before they ever published the article.
Okay, well again, everything is here from the attorneys, case by case, and it says right after each item that was presented, it says closed, agenda finding of no violation. This is from the attorneys. So
I'm gonna take the Attorney General's office and what they had to say versus what the legal counsel for the district has to tell us. Because we have found that through our legal counsel, there have been some opportunities for division and misinformation. And sometimes, to be very factual, it seems like Mr. Guanasso acts as the 6th board member. And I am highly offended by that. He needs to give us counsel and counsel only when we're in violation. And why the board wasn't apprised of this when we were the 90 days out or 45 days out that we were in violation. It took 15 of these to come to us, and then we had to go rectify. let's just cut through all, we can't change what's happened, folks, but we can go forward from this point and make sure it doesn't happen again. And I would say that all of us agree that it's time to just, look, learn from our mistakes and move on, because time is too short. It's too dang hot in here, and it's a beautiful summer night, so I'm just going to leave with that.
Well, so, related to the meeting minute one specifically, we did have to take corrective action on that, and we did, and it says that we took corrective action. It relates to the number of days in which you are required to approve your board minutes after you have the board meeting. Those minutes were presented to the board. A trustee had corrections to make to the minutes, and therefore our district clerk had to go make some corrections, and then they came back to the board for approval. Then a board member wanted additional information included in the board minutes. So it was not our staff's fault whatsoever. These were board requests as to why we did not meet the deadline. And then you add on top of that, Ms. Herring could totally correct me if she was here, but my understanding of this is that previously we used business days as the days to submit our meeting minutes for approval. When the Attorney General came back and gave their opinion, they counted it as calendar days. It is an interpretation, and we have corrected it. We are moving forward, and we are now approving our minutes within the time frame as advised by the Attorney General.
Next time.
One candidate received the information, the rest didn't. That question wasn't answered.
Hi, I'm Chuck Meyer, 26-year resident. I'd like to change the subject if I may. And I do have a question. The question is, would you please address what appears to be, to me, the Good Old Boys Club? 26 years ago, I sat in a board meeting and heard the pros and cons of the golfers. It was the golfers against the non-golfers. And that didn't bother me as much as what bothered me was people sat on the board and said, well, that's the way it is, and that's the way it's always been. I sat here today and heard people say, if I want to go to the beach that's part of my homeowner's, what I paid for in my deed, then I should either A, get up at 5 in the morning, or B, go during the week. I don't accept that just because that's the way it's always been, or because there was a study in 1970, whatever. So could you please just address what appears to be the Good Old Boys Club, status quo, it's just the way it always is.
Sure, thank you, Chuck. Tim Calicrate. There is a lot of deja vu going on. When I was on the board from 97 through 2000, some of the issues that were brought up then, and they go back 4 years ago when Kendra and I campaigned, and now what we're dealing with tonight. I guess it gets back to the earlier question as should we be marketing to non-residents, and I think that touches on your situation. I know that isn't a good answer, and if I came across as being flippant or, I didn't mean to be affronting to anybody in the community who's a property owner. Property owners have first and foremost, rule over all of what we do. You guys all pay the taxes. We get paid from the money collected. $9,000 a year, about 25 cents an hour. We signed up for it, that's life. Hold our feet to the fire. And yeah, there is enough of that good old boy in the status quo, and it needs to change. That's why Matthew Dent and I have always been in the minority, unfortunately, when it comes to the fiscal accountability. And who gets in line to all of our activity, first and foremost in the district. It's the property owners who pay the taxes. Then it's their residents and family members, or family members and residents. And to your point, you shouldn't have to get up at 5 in the morning or not go on a weekend. So to Indra's credit, I've been talking with him, as Kendra and the other trustees, and I call it strangling the life out of the people that don't deserve to be in our beaches. They need to go, so we get to enjoy them. Thank you.
Again, on Wednesday night, we're looking at the Community Services Master Plan. And what's on the table right now is mitigating these issues, coming up with viable plans so we can correct what we can moving forward in a financially solvent way. We're talking about reconfiguring the parking lots. We're talking about changing the gate entrances. We're talking about how long you have to wait in line to actually get into the parks. Again, we're dealing with residents primarily. there's a very small percentage that are non-resident guests, people with white or pink slips or whatever that is. We want to make people happy. Again, it's, you know, having that attitude that you understand that we're going to work with the community, get things done to the best degree that we can. We're going to put everything on the table we possibly can and come up with the best possible solution, given the narrow opportunities for a solution. So, thank you.
Yeah, I will say, I'm not sure I have a good answer for that, to be honest. I mean, in terms of a good old boys club, does it exist? Is it here? I don't know, to be honest. I don't know the answer to that. And I will also be honest, I don't know the solution for our beaches. But what I do know is that we have a lot of intelligent people in this community that have a lot of great ideas. And when we all start talking about them, something will come out that could be a potential solution for all of us.
This is Sarah Schmitz. I think one of the things that I bring to the table is that I am a fresh set of eyes. I don't have the historical bias that I mentioned at the beginning. I see our beaches as a huge asset to our community, and they help hold our property values. I look forward to getting the detailed information and putting numbers together and working with the community to identify a solution, because these beaches are there for our enjoyment. I have been reading and studying, as I had mentioned, and one of the things that was removed from the conduct of the board meetings, policy 3.1, is a little less than a year after General Manager Pinkerton joined, the advisory committees were done away with. For me, I think that they are things that we need to leverage. We need to work with experts in our community. If we have people who are experts in accounting or are experts in construction, I think that we have vast talent in this community, and I would love to see us put that together. And by doing that, it changes the whole chemistry, and it makes it more about us as a community. We all need to pull together. We're one community. We aren't divided here. We all live in the same place. And we need to be all pulling the same direction. That includes the community, that includes the board, that includes the staff. Thank you.
My name is Eric Durfee, and we live at 1085 Tiller. We moved here 20 years ago from Vermont, and one of the reasons we bought an incline versus Crystal Bay was the use of the private beaches. And back then, we were given, 5 picture passes, and then we were able to trade in a picture pass for a punch card. If you brought a guest to the beach, you had to be present with your guest, with your picture card, to get them onto the beach. And I'm not sure when this happened, but now you can trade in your passes and get a whole stack of individual passes. You can buy as many passes as you're able to buy. You can give them away at random. And I'm not sure when this happened, but we've noticed over on our side of town, the cars are parking all the way down Lakeshore, all the way to Highway 28, and that never happened before. So I'm wondering when this change occurred and if that change could be rolled back. So, sorry, I don't know if it's not working, but so that a property owner would have to be So a property owner would have to be present to bring their guests onto the beach.
Right. This has been a long-standing option for property owners. Indra and his staff have mitigated this. I think they've only had one person in many years actually come in and buy additional punch cards. I think the number was 5 or 10 or something. So it's not pervasive. It's out there, the opportunities are there, but the staff looks at and monitors what's going on with the picture passes. Back when I was on the board, we were dealing with Ordinance 7. The fear was that people would be able to go on Craigslist and buy punch cards and that type of thing. Historically, it hadn't happened during my tenure. It didn't happen. The opportunity, they checked these things, the staff with Parks and Recreation to mitigate this option. And again, we need to recognize that these people that are coming to our beaches are property owners, guests, and family. And of course, we don't see them because they're not here. Again, the number is 65% or greater. So.
If I may, Tim Calicrate, Eric, you asked the question of when did this start, the change occur, or at least a perceived change. And when I moved here, you had to be the person on the picture, or if you had a guest, you had to bring that person with you, and then you used your punch card, which was actually a punch card that they would punch off. And when it was done, you had to go on and either buy another one or use the one that you didn't have correspondent to how many picture passes you had on your property. That is a problem. I think that with the community, the beaches master plan that has been out there, the community's involvement, the community itself has to speak. That includes all property owners. Now for the 35 to 5,500, it depends on what time of the year, full-time year-round residents who are here. You know, our town gets taken over like the Hamptons in the summertime, and it's frustrating. Because as you said, you used to have to go and take your guests with you. I am against this, you know, let's try to get a number of things already predetermined, and you can just show up because you got the okay from the owner of the property. This is where the emotions really get out of control, because people who pay money for their property and are $830 a year expect to have those privileges. So there's an opportunity here for the community, meaning all of us here, to speak loudly and clearly on what it is you want to see on beach use. And it won't go on deaf ears, I'll guarantee you that.
This is Sarah Schmitz, and I have a list of questions that I have been trying to get the answer to. And one of the questions that I have is, in Ordinance 7, it says that the board has the ability to approve whoever they want to have additional passes. So I have a list of questions trying to find out who are all the people that do have passes, so that we can just figure out, what are we dealing with? Are we dealing with, you know, Sierra Nevada college students? Are we dealing with, what is it? What has been approved in the past by the board? So I have a list of questions, and Indra has been extremely busy with the 4th of July activities, and you know, my questions aren't on the highest of his priority list, I know that, but it gets back to how I approach things, and how I approach things is I try to gather the information to identify the problem and then formulate a solution. And until you really clearly identify the problem, you're just grasping at straws. And I wouldn't want to do anything that would harm. I agree with you, Eric. When we moved here, I thought that's how it did work, that I couldn't take a guest to the beach without me being there. So that was a bit of a surprise to me. But in the process of making a change, it's important to understand the ramifications, and I don't want to do any harm to existing residents. So it's really important to me to kind of analyze things and understand, based on the data, what the impact will be. Thank you.
This is Kendra. I'm not sure I have a whole lot more to add constructively to that conversation, except to say that Ordinance 7 is a priority of the board, and it is something that we've been consistently talking about and will definitely be talking about more. So as you know, beaches and beach access and Ordinance 7 comes up, please give us your thoughts, give us your information. We want to hear from you about what's working and what doesn't, because those are the things that then we can work on. Just keep in mind that Ordinance 7 in itself is a wormhole, and we're going to have to try and weave through all of the different paths and see what we can unwind without you know, the rule of unintended consequences. So that is definitely something that I know our staff and our legal team is looking at right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ed Gurwitz. I have a question for Ms. Schmitz. You said a few minutes ago that there's no divide in this community because we all live here. That's like saying there's no divide in the United States because we all live here. And at the Ivy Republican Women's Club and at a meet and greet, you said that you want to be elected so you can form a majority with Mr. Calicrate and Mr. Dent. If you're committed, there's no division here, and you haven't even yet been elected, and you're talking about who you're going to side with, then how can you make those kinds of decisions? How objective can you be when items come before the board for resolution?
Great question. It's a great question. So my perspective and my who I seem the most have most similarities in how we think about issues and address issues, it tends to be trustees Calicrate and Dent. I'm very analytical. I like to make sure that things are being handled properly. In that situation, what I am referring to is saying that when it looks like who am I more aligned to, that's a true statement. But as it relates to working with trustees Morris or trustee Haran, I have no issue with trying to bring things together. I'm very open, I'm very collaborative. I like to listen to other people's ideas and formulate conclusions on my own. That does not mean that I will vote every single way, every single time with Dent and Calicrate.
Anyone else on the board have anything to say about that? Good.
Hi, I'm Frank Wright. You've heard my name a few times tonight.
Just a few.
I have a question for Ms. Wong, and I'd like it answered in an honest and straightforward way and not run around. But we've had some issues that have come up in this community that are unique to this community, never happening before. The lawsuit that was initiated without board approval, the land sales that were initiated without board approval, and it's kind of discerning to see, after those things hit the papers, and the county and everybody else taking issue with it, I wait to see what you as a trustee and as a chairman have done to rectify the employee behavior that is so outrageous and egregious it defies description. What have you done as a chairman of the board to stop this from ever happening again? And what actions have you taken against those employees who have initiated these actions, spending this much money of our money on these ridiculous things and getting us in so much trouble?
Absolutely nothing, because we have an amazing staff. From the general manager all the way down to our staff that you see at all of our venues, they do an outstanding job in serving this community on a regular basis. Now, let's start with the lawsuit. So first of all, we had a legal non-meeting in which the board was notified that the lawsuit was being initiated. The Supreme Court action law that essentially says that all lawsuits have to be initiated by the board, as somebody mentioned, that law was passed after we had initiated our action. So there was no way for us to actually have complied with that law because the law didn't actually exist at that time. Okay?
Not true.
So,
Not true. They just re-emphasized.
That's right.
So, next, you are not speaking right now, Mr. Wright.
Oh, she's telling you to shut up.
Right.
The chairman has spoken. The chairman has
So
spoken.
then the second piece of that, the question was related to the land sales. First of all of those were initiated prior to me being on the board. And quite frankly, our legal team did a great legal analysis. It is actually available on our website. Initially,
No escrow.
should I continue?
Yeah.
You would like me to finish? Okay. So initially, there's kind of two ways that you can make land sales when you're a governmental entity. First, if it stays open space, then you're not required to pay back taxes. Okay? If you're going to sell the pieces of property and it's going into private hands and they're going to build something on it, then you have to pay back taxes. That's where the real issue was in the issue of the land sales. So if you backtrack a little bit, right, the parcels that were sold were part of the bitter brush condos, okay? And the original piece of land was subdivided into more parcels, more condo spaces than could actually ever really be built on. If any of you guys have gone up and gone by bitter brush and you look at that steep cliff, you know, I'm not sure any one of us that's reasonable enough would buy another piece of property up there, right? So there are these parcels that exist that actually have the ability to pay rec fees, but they can actually never be built on. And so before I was on the board allowed the staff to sell 3 of those parcels. They happened, they were done. I think the last one was concluded just as I was coming onto the board. This was never a topic that the board tried to conceal. It's never a topic that we, you know, wanted to hide. In fact, it's been disclosed in our CAFR every year that we have these undevelopable lots that they potentially could be sold at some point in time. When Steve Pinkerton was hired, and he was hired just before I got on the board, he essentially said, you know, something about these land sales, they may not be right, so let's not do any more of them. And that was the last that any of us had a discussion about them. Somebody brought up the topic in public comment and thought we were going to run rampant and sell all these parcels, and quite frankly, that didn't happen. I think in the end, we end up at a net cost to the district paying Marshall County $16,000 because they determined that these weren't open air parcels and we needed to pay the back taxes on them. So we ended up paying $16,000. In the meantime, for the last 4 years, we've been collecting the $830 a year rec fee on these parcels. So the board did take action a couple months ago and essentially said that we're not going to do any more land sales until we have a policy in place and how to deal with these. So I actually don't envision this board addressing this, and probably not the next board as well. So it may just be a dead issue. I don't know. Some future board could resurrect it in the future.
Any other comments?
Yes, I would like to make Tim Calicrate, regarding the litigation with the lawsuit against governmental services or flash vote. I was not present at the meeting, and Trustee Dent was asked to leave the room. And so that left the majority of the board with the general manager, the legal counsel, and I believe the director of finance to discuss moving forward on litigation. That's a closed meeting. That's not a non-meeting meeting. That's a majority of the board, and I never knew anything about this, or I would have gotten off my sick bed and gone in there and said absolutely not. I was approached 2 days later by our general counsel asking how I felt about moving forward with litigation against Flashfo. I said absolutely not. We're suing a local vendor in our community who provides a service that up until a point of him severing his situation with IVGID was well liked and well embraced by this community. So a point of clarity on that. In regard to the land sales, the third land sale, and both Kendra and I and other candidates were apprised that there was this outstanding third bit of land that was going to be sold when we first came on the board. It was in, I think, late November, early December. And I was like, wait a minute. And I remember approaching Steve saying, we can't do this. I think this has to be done in an open meeting because it's public land. And there are actually 3 ways. You can convey public land to an educational group. You can sell it to another organization or transfer it as open space, or you could put it on the open market and it is a bidding situation. So, again, these are all things that have taken place that would be virtually impossible to unroll. I think what we need to do is, folks, the learning curve has been horrendous. We need to take stock of where we are right now, try to find some commonality and work forward, because we're beating dead horses on this, and they'll soon be repackaging them and selling them at Rayleigh. So let's just.
Well, let me clarify something that Trustee Calicrate just said. This is kind of wrong. We cannot make decisions in a legal non-meeting. The board cannot make decisions in a legal non-meeting. That's
But you just said you did that. You just said you did that.
No, I did not.
You said you met in a closed door.
The general manager communicated to us that he was initiating the lawsuit. The board did not make a decision at the legal non-meeting.
And the general manager cannot move forward. It has to be in an open meeting. This is where our disagreement happens, Kendra. For him to have told you guys at that non-meeting that he was moving forward, you should have said as the chair, no, we have to agendize this, bring it to a general meeting, out in the public, then vote on it, and then it would have been, not messy. But because that didn't happen, Steve can't just generate any kind of litigation and then tell you in a closed meeting that's a non-meeting meeting that he's going to move forward. That is where the problem lies.
Did you want to say anything?
No.
We're gonna have to agree to disagree at this point because
I just have, it's not about the lawsuit situation per se, but again, I go back to our written policies, and our written policies say that condominium and townhouse areas that do not include any dwelling units, they are not on the rec roll. It also states that any undeveloped residential parcels which are not designated as unbuildable, which is a double negative, but basically it's saying unbuildable lots are not on the rec roll. So to me, it seems like it was a mistake that they are on the rec roll, and my perspective is to be selling lots where no one resides to participate as a resident and receive the benefits of this community. They aren't actually residents. So it's sort of an oxymoron, but I did want to point out that it is in our policy that they are excluded from the recreation roll.
Question is over.
Yeah, Gary Stewart, 321 Skiway. The question I have, if you were meeting today with the general manager to establish district priorities, what would be your number one priority? And this is for anybody on the board, and the group, excuse me.
Ted Calcray, my number one priority would be to, again, go back to my very first campaign promise, and that's to do an in-depth, independent, financial analysis of our district, a comprehensive forensic audit, so that we can dispel all the hoopla that's out there. And we can exonerate people that need it. If something has been done, we can rectify the issue and move forward. Because until and unless we find out exactly how much we have in each and every venue and that we're operating under the right manner of doing that, we're creating more problems than we need to. And we're not addressing the fundamental root that many in the community, and not just the typical group of people that we all laugh and giggle at. There are some brilliant minds in this community who spent the last several years going through each and every aspect of the books that are available, which of course they all aren't. Because if you look at our website, it says most of the financial information is available. Most should be all. We're a public agency. It should all be out there, folks. If we have nothing to hide, no one should be excited and upset that we're doing a forensic accounting, because we're not implicating anyone. And as far as the cost involved, we could take the $1.6 million that was earmarked for Parasol. I think that would far and away cover the amount for a forensic audit. Thank
you. This is Sarah Schmitz. I would just like to add to Tim's. I agree with what he said. I would add two other things. Mr. Simonian talked about the board meetings of being a black hole. Right now, communications is a black hole. And we have staff, we have talented staff that has the role of doing communication. I do weekly status reports for everyone. Doing some sort of communication to the community on a regular basis in simple terms so that all of us can understand what's going on. That would help alleviate some of this black hole. We need to have interaction going back and forth. We need to have questions that get answered and feedback. Right now, when people ask questions or ask for information, they get nothing back. That's not a good situation, and that is the black hole that Mr. Simonian talked about. The other thing, in addition to Tim's, is to re-implement an active audit committee. Our audit committee modified their charter last year, reducing the number of times that they need to meet down to only once annually. I would like to see that audit committee reinvigorated and take responsibility for overseeing the fiduciary responsibilities of our district. Thank you.
one priority again, and I will agree with Sarah, is communication and creating a collaborative effort here in the district. There has been a lot of finger-pointing allegations thrown around. The turnover in the district has been huge. We've lost a lot of great people through innuendo and allegations. And it's been unfortunate. One of my priorities would be creating a great foundation again, looking at our finances and that type of thing. I've been here for 40 years. Even during the recession, we were one of the few solvent municipalities in the United States. I worked with Washoe County during the recession. They had a $33 million deficit, and we dumped another 43 on top of that for the Tax Revolt League. We know what we can do. I've seen what we can do. I have faith in our staff, in Jerry, in our accounting department, and anything that I need to know, I'm going to get answers for, and I've gotten answers on. I think it's disingenuous to say that we need to go in and pull things apart. We need to know specifically what you're looking for and what you want to see. A forensic audit, the allegation there is there's something wrong